Destiny has brought me this candy bar. Now, that's going to make a whole lot more sense if you see the movie. Joaquin Phoenix once again teams up with Ridley Scott, and this time he's bringing us Napoleon. It's an epic movie, but is it any good? Napoleon follows the checkered rise and fall of French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte and his relentless journey to power through the lens of his addictive, volatile relationship with his wife, Josephine. So we got Joaquin Phoenix and Vanessa Kirby starring in this. And true to Ridley Scott form, the cinematography, it is beautiful. His vision for showcasing vast landscapes that will be riddled with bodies from the battle, and then the way he creates grandeur and scale for his locations, it's stunning. There are times where we are dwarfed by the sheer magnitude of a surrounding and the way Scott places the camera so that we are made to just be a minuscule observer. And then when it comes to the action, Scott knows how to deliver. Several magnificent battle sequences are immersive, violent, and breathtaking. The final act makes up one of these battles, and not only is the filming immersive, but it's beautifully captured in all its violent glory. There is a massive level of excitement that's contained within these. Now, as a warning, CGI or not, if you're sensitive to animal deaths, there are quite a few horses that are casualties during these melees. One scene during a battle reminded me a bit of Braveheart, where we were watching Napoleon exert as much patience as possible while troops are advancing on his army before he then unleashes a barrage of artillery. Now, I didn't go into this movie expecting huge historical accuracy. Scott himself even commented about a scene where Napoleon fires a cannon at the pyramids in Egypt, saying that it was just a fast way to show Napoleon conquered Egypt. So if you're going into this thinking it's going to be documentary level attention to historical facts, just set that aside. Also, if characters not having region-specific accents is something that annoys you, the actors in this, they just speak in whatever their native accent is. So Phoenix, he's utilizing an American gruff accent. Kirby speaking in her natural British accent, as are many of the other British actors who are playing the roles of French people. Now, I think Scott just didn't want to deal with people not being able to nail an accent, so he just told the actors to speak normally. He did the same in The Last Duel, and while it is a bit weird at first, I was able to overlook it as just a quirk of this particular storytelling approach. Vanessa Kirby's great in this. She's damaged and cagey at times, but also has what's going to sound like a contradiction, but she's both subdued and fierce at the same time. And while she can be antagonistic, she also has some qualities that makes her endearing, especially as she infuses humor or strength into her character. Now for Phoenix, when he's vulnerable, either when he's having heartfelt discussions with Kirby or just letting his defenses down to be real and open, this is when he was at his best. I connected with the character and he became a person, one that I could both root for and against. But certainly I was also being invested in his actions and his decisions. Outside of those times though, I think Phoenix was just miscast as Napoleon. I'm not saying his performance is bad by any means. He was impressive and he grew way beyond the character's stature with just this commanding presence and a charismatic demeanor. But I just didn't buy him as Napoleon. He didn't disappear into the role or become so engrossing that I forgot I was watching somebody play a part. He was always Joaquin Phoenix, even in the vulnerable parts. He was just exceptional during those scenes. Now, I'm not sure who I'd want in this role, especially because Phoenix is such a powerhouse and he can create beautifully complex characters. Maybe it was just the direction that he got from Scott, but whatever it was, this was more of a missed opportunity with the character. And now I want to talk about the story itself. This is a mess. The storytelling, it's choppy and broken up into what feel more like vignettes than a cohesive story. Now, sometimes there are dates or locations put on the screen, but aside from those, time, it's pretty indeterminate. And there's no background given on Napoleon or then any of the people he comes into contact with. Josephine is probably the one with the most development, and she doesn't get much at all. And multiple times the scene would fade to white and then come back in a new time or location, with very little, if any, context as to what went on in that blip period. And while some of these may not be that important or pertinent to the story, they did hurt the flow. And I think what hurt the narrative even more was many sequences lacked character or event background to establish what the heck was going on. Who the players were, and then why their involvement was integral to this particular moment. Now, for example, there's a point when Napoleon is one of 3 consuls for France, and there's a private discussion of him doing something more. And then we flash to Napoleon being crowned. What happened with the other two consoles? I mean, it's small elements like this that are rampant throughout the movie that then all add up to ultimately become a massive detriment to the story. And then when that's combined with a 2 hour and 38-minute runtime, the flaws are amplified. I mean, I felt the time. Before the third act even begun, I was looking at my watch. I was desperately wanting to be so captivated by the movie that at times just stood still. And that didn't happen. From the very beginning, I often felt like I was trying to play catch up with elements of the storyline. I mean, yeah, you can gather the gist of what's going on in most scenes, but so many contextual nuances weren't effective because I had zero idea of who the players were and why they mattered. I mean, even as Napoleon is conquering lands, we're not shown the scale of his accomplishments. We don't get an illustration or any sort of idea of how much area he was able to overthrow and take for France. And I think this would have been an impressive element to highlight. Now, to the film's credit, I know that ultimately Napoleon isn't some huge hero or monster success, but he did have some remarkable victories, and the story shows us both sides, where he employed ingenuity and cunning to defeat opponents, as well as some major miscalculations that led to horrendous losses. So, overall, if you're a massive fan of Ridley Scott, you're most likely going to see this no matter what. But if you're more of the casual moviegoer looking to see if the film is worth dropping a chunk of change on, the battle sequences are epically large and immersively captured, showcasing unflinching brutality with beautiful cinematic style. The cinematography as a whole is stunning, transporting audiences into the locales to viscerally experience the settings. When Joaquin Phoenix showcases a vulnerable side with his character, he shines, creating a complex and varied persona. But outside of those moments, he doesn't ever disappear into the role, never really becoming Napoleon. And while the action sequences are energetic and thrilling, the rest of the story is choppy and messily told, negating character or situational background so that each new scene is disjointed from the last, creating a narrative that lacks cohesiveness and results in a series of broken vignettes. There's sex, brief nudity, some profanity, and a ton of brutal violence. I give Napoleon 2 out of 5 couches. This was unfortunately just a huge disappointment. So, what's a favorite of Ridley Scott's? Now, for me, I think my favorite has to be The Martian, just based on the number of times that I go back to watch it. But I would love to hear yours in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.